We are doing lesson 13.6, which is writing equations in slope-intercept form. Our I can statement for today, I can write equations of lines in slope-intercept form. All right, so we looked at slope-intercept form earlier in the chapter, and basically that is an equation that is solved for y, the number in front of the x. So on this one, the -3/2, that stands for your slope, and the number that is by itself, that is your y-intercept. Just as a reminder, slope-intercept form, I'm going to write it right here for you, is y equals m, which is your slope, x plus b, which is your y-intercept. So for our first type of problem today, you are looking at the graph, and you're looking for your slope and your y-intercept, and you're going to substitute them into the equation. So for example, on this one, the rise is a -3, because this line has negative slope. It's pointing down like a capital N, so it's negative. It's going down 3, it's going over 2, so that's a slope of -3/2. So that's the number that goes in front of the x. And unless it's a story problem situation, we don't want mixed numbers. We either want a whole number or we want a fraction with 2 parts. And then we look to see where it hits the y-axis. So here is where it hits the y-axis. That's the 0.05. That means that 5 is the value on the y-axis where the line crosses the y-axis. That's my y-intercept. So my slope, -3/2, goes in front of the x. And then the y-intercept, that b, for this one it's 5. So our equation is y equals -3/2 x plus 5. Okay, here are 2 more graphs for you. Go ahead, for each one you need to identify what the slope and the y-intercept is, and then you're going to use those 2 things to find your equation that is written in slope-intercept form. Go ahead and pause the video and write down what you think the equation is for each graph. Okay, let's go ahead and check to see if your answers are correct. So for number 1, you start by finding the slope between any 2 points. I'm just choosing to do the 2 points that are listed there. You go up 2 and over 1. So that tells us that our slope is going to be 2. That's the number in front of the x. Then we find the y-intercept. Where did it hit the y-axis? At the point 0, 2. That's 2 is our y-intercept. So that goes here. So on this one, it just happened to be the same number. Most of the time, they're different numbers. Y equals our slope of 2 times x plus our y-intercept of 2. All right, on the second one, again, we start with the slope. And so I look to see what the rise and run is. Now this line is pointing down from left to right, which is why I have a negative slope here. It's going down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, down 4. And it's going over to the side 1, 2, 3. Rise over run, -4 over 3, that's our slope. That's the value in front of the x. Then we look to see where does that line hit the y-axis. And it hits the y-axis at -1, 0, -1. That value right there, that's our y-intercept. I could write plus -1, but I don't really need to write plus negative. I can just write -1. It means the same thing. So our equation is y equals -4/3, that's our slope, x minus 1, which is our y-intercept. All right. This next one says, which equation is shown in the graph? If we take a look at our graph here, we have something that has 0 slope. So that means we're not going to have both a y and an x in equations where you have either a 0 slope or horizontal slope. And when you have one of those two, you have to see what's in common between the two to write your equation. So here I have a -4 on this side. I have a -4 on this side. Both of those are in the y place. Remember, our ordered pairs are x and then y, x and then y. So on both of mine, because I have the same y values, that tells me in my equation, y equals -4. Now, if my x's were the same, I'd see a vertical line, and then I would have x equals whatever my x numbers are. But here, the y's are the same, so it's going to be y equals -4. Now, I could put that in slope-intercept form if I want to. My slope here is 0. So really I could write it this way, y equals 0 for my slope times x. And then my y-intercept, if I go down to my graph and look at where it hits, that's at -4. So I could write the equation this way, 0 for my slope times x minus 4. But it doesn't really work that way with a vertical line because you have undefined, and you can't really write y equals undefined x minus 4 or plus 2 or whatever it is. So just know for horizontal or vertical lines, you don't really have a slope. It's either zero slope or it's undefined slope. So you have to look at what's in common and use that for your equation. Negative 4 for the y's was what was in common, so it's going to be y equals negative 4. All right, let's take a look at this story problem. It says the graph shows the distance remaining to complete a tunnel. A, write an equation that represents the distance y in feet remaining after x months, and B, how much time does it take to complete the tunnel? So they're asking us for two things. First thing we need to do is to write that equation in slope-intercept form. So I took a look at my graph and I started by finding my slope. So you could find in between 2 points. I actually chose this point and this point. So this point is 1, 3,000, and this is 0, 3,500. And so when I'm looking at these two, now it looks like over 1, up 1, but really you have to look at the numbers here. So this is going from 3,000 to 3,500. That's going up 500, a vertical change of 500, except really instead of going up, it's going down. So it's going down 500. And then from side to side, our run on that one is a is 1. That is going from 0 to 1 down here. So negative 500 over 1. That gives me a slope of negative 500, which is the first part of my equation over here. Then for my second part of my equation, then I needed to find my y-intercept. So I looked at where my y-axis is and where the line hits it. So it hits it right here at 0, 3,500. That's my y-intercept. So I have y equals negative 500, my slope, x, plus 3,500, which is my y-intercept. So now that I've finished A and I have my equation, I have a couple of options for figuring out B, which is how much time does it take to complete the tunnel. Now, since I have a graph to look at, that's the easiest way to do it. And the answer is 7 months. When I look at my graph, I can see 0 feet remaining, 7 months. But if I don't have a graph, like on this next one that you're going to be trying from this problem on your own, you don't have a graph. So you either have to make a graph or you can use your equation to help you figure that out. So I've written the work down here for how I would do it without a graph, just knowing the equation. So no more feet, that means my y value would have to be 0 with the rest of this equation from above. So negative 500x plus 3,500. To cancel out the 3,500, we subtract it on both sides. So that cancels 3,500 minus 3,500 is 0. That part canceled out. I'm left with negative 500x on this side of the equation. And then 0 minus 3,500 is negative 3,500. And then I divide by the number in front of my variable. For this one, it's negative 500. Negative 3,500 divided by 500 gives me 7, which is the same answer that I got from my graph. So if I have a graph, I can just look where, when y is 0, what happened, where's our x. If I don't have a graph, then I can put 0 in for y and solve my equation to find out what the x value would be. It's really my x-intercept, where that x is hitting the line is hitting the x-axis. All right, here are 2 problems for you to do on your own. For this first one, now you could graph it if you want, but pay attention that this 5 and this 5, those are the same as each other. That's going to help you write your equation. And then for number 4 in example 3, the points are 0, 3,500, and 5, 1,500. How long does it take to complete the tunnel? Now you can graph it if you want, so it looks like the last one. Otherwise, you're going to have to use those points to find your slope and your y-intercept, and because this x is 0, that 3,500, that's going to be your y-intercept. You'll still need to calculate the slope to get your equation, and you're going to need that equation to solve for how long it takes to complete the tunnel. All right, go ahead and pause the video and try those 2 problems on your own. Okay, let's go ahead and check our answers. So on this first one, number 3, the equation is y equals 5. In both of those ordered pairs, we have 5 as our common number. If we had graphed it, I would see a line that is horizontal with 0 slope, and then the y-intercept of 5. For 4, I chose not to graph it. Again, you could have done the graph, but I'm showing you the work for how to do it without the graph. So I told you before you started on your own that 3,500, that is our y-intercept. That's because x is 0, so our y is 3,500. That's our y-intercept, but you do have to use subtraction, which we've done before for slope, to find the slope for the equation. So I subtracted my y's and I subtracted my x's. Remember, y goes on the top, rise over run. 3,500 minus 1,500 is 2,000. I chose to do this first order pair first. And because I chose to do this one first, 3,500 went on the top, and then the 0 went on the bottom directly underneath it because they're from the same ordered pair. And then my 1,500 went on the top, so my 5 has to go below it. 0 minus 5 is negative 5. Simplifying that to be a whole number, really it's not a whole number because it's a negative value. So I'm simplifying it to be an integer. And 2,000 divided by negative 5 is negative 400. That's my slope. So now I know my y-intercept and I know my slope, so I can write my slope-intercept form equation. Y equals my slope, negative 400, x, plus my y-intercept, 3,500. So I still haven't answered my question because they didn't say write the equation. They just said how long does it take. But I needed the equation to figure out how long it takes. Otherwise, I need a graph to figure that out. So I took 0 and I put it in for y because I want to know when there is 0 feet left, how long and how long is our x there. So 0 equals negative 400x plus 3,500. So now I solved it. I subtracted my y-intercept, so subtracting 3,500 on both sides. That gives me negative 3,500 equals negative 400x. I divided by the number in front of the x, and when I did that, I got 8 and 75/100 months. If you put 9 months, that's okay. I mean, if you're only counting whole months, it would be 9, but a month is something that you can split into a decimal or fraction. We could have a half a month. We could have 3/4 of a month. This would be like 8 months and 3 weeks. So you could have the decimal. If you just put 9, that would be okay as well. So 8 and 75/100 months, that's going to be how long it's going to take to finish the tunnel at that rate. All right, and our final one here. So for a line that has been graphed in a coordinate plane, you can write the equation by, go ahead and finish that sentence. Pause the video, write your sentence now. Okay, so let's go ahead and check our answers. So for this particular one, finding the slope and the y-intercept, and then substituting the value in slope-intercept form. So remember, the slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. And that's all we have for today.